When it comes to making any of the different inventories in Elden Ring fit your personal needs the best, it's always a question of how complicated or how concise you want it to be. Both are perfectly fine, and everybody has their own personal answer in terms of what works for them. But what if you're trying to get as many things into as small and concise a package as possible? And that's where I want to talk about grid theory today, coined by me. Yeah, I thought it sounded cool, so stick with me. We're going to talk about a little thing I called grid theory, which is about just making sure that your inventory is taking up as little space but accomplishing just about everything you can possibly ask for. So in today's video, we're going to be going over part of that, which is the diagonal talisman idea, which I have right here and I will show in a moment. And then I will also be showing you guys how this inventory right here was made. While this might just look like a jumble of colors to you as of right now, once I've explained it, I think you will agree that this is very concise and is able to do a ton of different things and has a tool for every single situation just about. Oh, thanks for the like, dude. But anyway, with that being said, why don't we go ahead and look into these different inventories and what makes them unique. So let's first start with the talismans. The diagonal talisman setup is going to do a lot of really interesting things. Other than being very easy on the eyes, in my opinion, it's going to make it to where we have a ton of different options in terms of how to quickly set up our talismans while spending as little time focusing on them as possible. So for example, if I want to use my consecutive hit talismans, normally I'm swapping to the right one on both talisman 1 and 2. But say that I'm fighting somebody who has a bleed weapon and I want some robustness, and I quickly swap talisman 1 down to the robustness charm. Well, guess what? 2 and 3 are also only a single tick away from the exact same setup. Say I want to get to the Godskin Swaddling Cloth. 3 of my inventory options are now 2 tiles away, rather than one of them being 3 tiles away, if that makes sense. And this way, it makes it to where just about every single swap we can go to has something. One of the talisman slots is extremely close by. And also having it sort of outlined like this, where up here at the top we have our hyper mode when we're at low HP. Over here at the side we have a ton of our different elemental defenses. Down here at the bottom we're outlined by our different resistances. The Kindred of Rot is right here for when we are fighting a poison build and we decide, hey, we want to take their buff and use it for our own. Generally, here above the diagonal, I have what I'm usually going to be swapping to a little bit more commonly. And then under the diagonal, we have things that are, at least in terms of my personal gameplay, going to be a little bit more niche, though still common enough to justify it being in this setup. Personally, I've started using this a ton. It's also a fantastic way of making use of only a single playthrough's worth of talismans, because oftentimes you'll watch an invader have 25 copies of the exact same talisman, and you're like, yeah, I can't do that with my build, or I just don't feel like duplicating. I don't have a single problem with duplicating, but I know that some people do. This is, as you can see, this doesn't have any duplicates. You can get all of this in a single playthrough of the game. So not only is this a very competent menu, it also is something that is very achievable by only playing through the game once. Now let's take a look at the second thing about this in quotation grid theory that I want to talk about. So I suppose I should clarify the reason I'm giving that name is because it's all about taking up the least amount of spaces to accomplish the most amount of things, if that makes sense. And so while you may be looking at this and just see a bunch of weapons, my placement for this weapon choice right here is different than, say, a weapon right here. And so we have different swaps for what hand I plan on having my weapon in. So this is going to be combining every single video in the series before now, other than the mage related one. So the thing is we're first going to start with this. I always put my seal for any of my characters that is not a caster in this specific hand right here, because left hand armament 2 is usually the most difficult one to swap to. It takes the most amount of inputs from just about any different way that you can get to it. So this is where I like to keep my seal. And then also I just personally don't have any plans of swapping to this one specifically in terms of changing this seal to anything else. I like having it be a constant, specifically in this hand. So with that being said, I don't have any swaps set up for it. Everything else here is set up for something else. Essentially, I have this as out of the way as I possibly can. Now, when it comes to our other swaps, I have a plan for my right-hand weapons, my second right-hand weapon, and my third left-hand weapon. Now, this is combining the ideas of Southpaw, which you should know about from one of the previous episodes. You should also know about why we use left hand 3, which is just as a mental refreshers, because if you're in right hand 1, which is the fastest one you can get to, and click the left bumper, you are now at left hand 3, which means that it is the fastest way to swap both of your weapons. Let's say you are running this, for example. Let's say you're running a great shield and a halberd, and you want to get to power stance great spears. Then you can do it extremely fast with very little effort. Let me get back on topic. So I'm going to go in order of least complicated hand placement to most complicated. I already explained that I have the Frenzy Seal as far out of the way since I plan on never swapping it. The hand that I swap the least often after that is the Misericord. I like having this for some pocket utility, whether it be very high crit fishing or to be able to Bloodhound Step. But the thing is that there is one swap that I have set up for my second hand, which is to be able to quickly and get a buff relevant to this build, which for this character is the Grafted Blade. So based on what type of build you're running, it may not be the Grafted Blade, it might be something else. It might also be nothing at all. But if you do have a buff that you are going for, then oftentimes it is worthwhile to make sure that it's not interfering with what's in your main hands. You're able to swap to it real quickly, pop it, and then get that out of there, and then just soft swap back to your main setup. Now, the thing is that other than that, the next thing that we have to look at is going to be our Southpaw two-handed weapons. So this lineup of specifically 6 weapons is all the things that I plan on two-handing. So whether it be my greatsword or any of these other weapons you see here, these are things that we're going to be running in the offhand, and then with the main hand, I am still able to swap to things I have set up there that all serve their own unique purpose. So with that being considered, this is just a very basic lineup of things that I plan on using with both of my hands. Now when it comes to power stancing, I kind of have it set up in an interesting way. And I should elaborate that it's not entirely power stancing, but it is mostly power stancing. Essentially, I have 2 lines for the things that I plan on either power stancing or having a specific setup for. So, from my cestus, I have this lineup of weapons that would be in my main hand, right? Mostly these 3 right here. This halberd, so I can run Haldag, or Hal Hatchet, if you will, which I'll show in a second. Great lances or power stanced straight swords. So if I have my cestus, then I'm able to quickly swap to say this, and then this row down here is my left hand for any of my setups where I'm either power stancing or the left hand is not the primary focus. So that can be either a great shield, it can be to allow myself to go into Haldag mode, or say I'm going to power stance great spears. It's just a couple of horizontal ticks away. And then also the same thing applies to the Knight Sword and the Hatchet. So that's what's important about those. The reason that I have the Twin Blade right under my Halberd is because when you do some poise damage with the off dagger, it can be extremely valuable to swap to the Twin Blade, and then the first hit of the running R2 against most people will break rather than the second, which makes it very scary. So yeah, generally speaking, what you have going on here is you have sort of this X pattern across my screen where the main hand is going to have options to reflect projectiles. I have my base Endure Cestus option. I have 2 options above it that are great for hitting people who are trying to run away from you, or just close distance very quickly. And then all the way at the top, I have my Get Off Me tool. Now, essentially the flavor of what you're using will change based on what archetype you're running, but this is what I've decided for this odd quality build I've got going on. But also, stemming off to the side of it, I'm able to quickly swap to other things that are going to want to be in the main hand, but are not necessarily the baseline setup of what I'm doing. And then also I should mention that a tick left is this right here. Essentially, Swords Dance on a Great Axe is some of the highest Swords Dance damage you can possibly get, and so I have that as my single tick to the left from the Cestus. And then also all the way over here to the right, the sickle, the Celebrant sickle, is one of the best finishing weapons in the game. Since it is a sickle, it goes around shields innately, even when physical damage infused, and then the lightning helps it go through even more. So between it being a dagger, which has plenty of unreactable attacks, and also having Thunderbolt, which is a very good thing to prevent people from healing, this is a fantastic finishing option against people that are very low on HP. Now, generally when it comes to the rows that I have right below my main hand swaps, and then also the one that I have at the bottom, because this is generally just the last thing I haven't covered yet, I like to have my parry options, or their effective equivalents. It's just my personal preference to have one tick down on the D-pad be my parry option, or carry-on retaliation, or my golden retaliation in this regard. And then just the one exception to this rule is being able to swap to that twin blade. And then no matter what build I'm running, I like having my range stuff all the way at the bottom. And this is the important thing about it too. It's not just about making an inventory that works for you. It's also making sure that you can make certain ideas in your brain connect regardless of what build you're using. No matter which character I'm looking at, if I press the trigger up once, I am at my get off me tool. There's too many people all up in my space. This is how I get them off of me. And one tick down is always going to be one of my ranged options. So that's the big thing about grid theory. There's so many ideas going on here, but as you can see, we just barely have more than a single scroll wheel. So making sure that we get the most bang out of these few tiles, keeping it light, concise, keeping it to where there's plenty of brevity, but also a ton of depth as well. And here's another example of essentially the same idea. This is my strength build, and I absolutely love this inventory. We have the same idea going on where our main hand has this very nice vertical and horizontal lineup of things to swap to, as well as a single tick being the watchdog staff. And then I have it done a little bit different to where some of our offhand options are also very close to the things that we plan on holding in Southpaw. So say for example our greatsword, if I wanted to go Haldag, I would very quickly be able to... Uh-oh, I messed up my inputs. Let's try that one more time. We would very quickly be able to get to Haldag like so, and that applies for the other power stance and southpaw options I have available, as well as being able to quickly swap from the offhand dagger or southpaw setup to the fingerprint. So just another example of what this can look like in practice. And with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and call it an episode. There will at the very least be one more in the future, maybe more based on what the DLC does, but I have an experimental idea that I have not fully fleshed out yet of what if you just have nothing in your main hand and you swap with that. So, thing is that I have not used it as much as I thought I was going to by this point, so I will save it for an experimental concepts 2 for some time in the future. But with that being said, I hope you guys have learned a thing or two, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.